Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the AFTD 2023 Education Conference. You are joining in virtually on one of our breakouts, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. The breakout is helping families get on the same page, and we have two experts that are going to share their insights on family challenges and conflict, but also how to support families to resolve those difficulties and conflicts. The session was designed with the primary target audience being healthcare professionals who help and support families, but it's also of relevance and interest to family members, both persons who are caregivers and as well as people with FTD. What I will say is we are in Zoom and that we would like you to think about any questions that you would have during the program and to go ahead and put those in chat. The audience will be muted throughout the program, but I will be going into chat regularly to review those questions. And then after our presenters are finished, we'll have some time to take, I'll curate some of those questions. You should know that the session will likely end close to time to keep us moving along, but we'll be happy to run over if we're still in the middle of questions. So what I am going to do is go ahead and introduce our two speakers. They'll each speak for about 15 to 17 minutes, and then we'll take time for me to ask some questions. So our first speaker is Dr. Jennifer Heston-Mullins. She is the Associate Director of Research and Senior Research with Scripps Gerontology Center at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Dr. Heston-Mullins has been a licensed social worker in Ohio for 25 years. Her research includes the exploration of the experiences and roles of direct caregivers, home care, person-centered care, communication, care coordination within caregiving families, and dementia, inclusive and capable communities, and more. And she will be speaking primarily about a free resource that can be available to families and to healthcare professionals called Our Family, Our Way. She will tell us more. Our second presenter is Gail Goodman, and she is the founder and principal of Talking Alternatives. And she has over 30 years of management experience in government, nonprofit agencies, and foundations. She began her career in the counseling field and worked in social services. She received her certificate in mediation and conflict resolution from New York University and received her specialized training in elder and adult family mediation from Elder Decisions. She's been mediating for Family Services of Westchester and has also mediated in the courts of New York County and Westchester County. So I am going to invite our first speaker, Dr. Mullins, to join us.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Heston-Mullins, as Will said. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm a researcher, as he said, at Scripps Gerontology Center in Miami University of Ohio. We like a little joke we like to share that Miami was a university before Florida was a state. So when it comes up to that confusion, sometimes people think we're in Florida, but we are in Ohio. And prior to going into research, I worked with older adults and their family members and their care partners for over 20 years in long-term care services and supports. So I'm going to share some slides with you today. Just as we're talking, just as some visuals for us here. And so I also provided some care and support and was part of a care partner team for 3 family members whom I dearly loved. And one of those individuals lived with Alzheimer's probable dementia. And so I have a professional interest and a personal interest in caregiving families and care partnering. And I'm really excited to share a resource today that's been developed by researchers at Scripps Gerontology Center in collaboration with individuals living with dementia and individuals receiving care and support from their family members and those family members. And it's called Our Family, Our Way. And we call this OFOW for short. So you'll hear me say OFOW throughout. But it's a communication and care coordination resource that we've developed that caregiving families can use to help them have good conversations about care and support, and to discuss their caregiving arrangements, what's happening within their arrangement. And it was originally designed as a resource for families to use on their own without the help of a professional. But it is also a tool that professionals can use in their work with caregiving families. And so we're really excited to share that with you. And kind of briefly, we've developed written tools that help each family member, including the person with care needs, think about their perceptions of the family's care and support arrangement and walks them through the process of holding a family meeting where they create a plan for who will do what, where, why, and when. And OFOW was initiated by Dr. Kathy McGrew in 2016. And since then, we've had a couple of rounds of support funding from the RRF Foundation on Aging and the Ohio Long-Term Care Research Project. And it's really informed, though, by years of research and practice experience among our team that's been focused on older adults and sometimes that term is a little nebulous, but people who are living with dementia, their care partners and professionals who serve those caregiving families. So I'm going to provide just a very brief overview of the OFOW materials and the process and introduce you to those. And I also want to clarify that when I use the term family or family members today, that we mean that term very broadly to include individuals that are related by blood and also families of choice, which we know can also include friends. So I just want to make that very clear when we say family, that we mean that very broadly. So our work was really inspired by this belief that it's often family problems and difficulties in family communication that cause families to struggle with a lot of the aspects of caregiving and care partnering. And in particular, we targeted 4 communication problems that are found in family communication and caregiving literature. First one is not seeing eye to eye about what's needed, wanted, and possible. And this is in the care arrangement. So in my example from my own family, my sister thinks that my mom should stop using the stove because it's not safe. My mom thinks she's fully capable of using the stove and we should leave her alone. I think she can certainly still use the stove, but maybe there are some safety things that we can put in place to help. And my brother lives 2 states away and he really has no idea what's going on with mom and the stove. And so we have these different perceptions of what's going on in the care arrangement. We also often fail to acknowledge that each family member's decisions affect other family members. So when my sister decides that mom's just not going to cook at all, she's going to cook all the meals herself, my mom loses that chance to cook for herself, which is something she really enjoys. And I give up on the great idea that I had of saying, hey, maybe we could get some home delivered meals that might help, or maybe we could look at some congregate meals where mom could meet some other people and socialize with them. And my brother decides, great, this is taken care of. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Oftentimes, families also do things without talking and without actually deciding anything. So when my sister jumps in and just starts cooking, it's as though a family decision has been made, but there actually was no decision made. Someone just acted and we never really had a conversation around it. And finally, when families exclude some family members from the discussion process, it's especially difficult to achieve a good care and support relationship or a good arrangement within your family. And too frequently, the person who is left out of those conversations around care and support and those decisions is the person with care needs. It happens a lot. People start having conversations here and there and on the side and all around, and they're not actually including that person. But other people are often excluded too for a variety of reasons. And those families, you can have in-laws that are part of a family, step family members, and all those folks often get excluded for different reasons. So the goal of OFOW, or Our Family, Our Way, is to improve communication between family members about care and support, get people talking to each other. Ensure that the person with care needs is included in conversations and decisions about their own care and support. To the level that they wish to be and that they are able to be. And we have modified some tools that I'm going to talk about to make that a little bit easier for some folks. And we also want to increase the involvement of family members and others. So there may be multiple people in a family that can be part of a care arrangement, but oftentimes we find that one person ends up being a primary care partner, and there's not always others that are helping in that situation or are part of those discussions, even though they might be available and they might even be willing to do so. They just haven't really been engaged in the process. So OFOW works like this. Each member of the family, including the person with care needs, completes a set of individual tools that helps them think through and write down their unique perspective of the care and support arrangement. After everyone in the family completes their individual tools, the family determines a date and a time and a place for their family meeting. There's a family meeting guide that walks the family through the process of holding their meeting, and it's very scripted. So it actually, we include in our instructions for this that there actually can be someone who's the kind of the facilitator or the narrator for this family meeting, and they read the instructions as they go through the family meeting. And prior to or at the beginning of the family meeting, we usually recommend prior to, the family members actually have a chance to look at each other's completed individual tools before they meet, so they can see how other people have talked about the care arrangement and how it affects them. And then when they come together, they engage in what we call a shared assessment, where they really compare their answers to different areas of care and support. So this is how I see the situation. This is maybe how my parent sees the situation or how my sibling sees the situation. And we talk about the places where we agree on things and then places where we just don't agree or don't see things eye to eye in that particular circumstance. And then we try to work together to negotiate those areas of difference during the conversation. And then acknowledge that there are just some places where we just can't agree right now. And that helps us become part of our future work together as we're talking about care and support. And then we develop a family care and support plan. And this is also where the family thinks about a follow-up plan. So in the family care and support plan, they identify, okay, here are some steps we're going to take related to our shared assessment of what we think needs to happen. And then this is when we're going to follow up with each other again to talk about it or to see how things are going. So this is just a snapshot of the individual tools. And there are two versions of these. There's a version for the person with care needs, and there's a version for the care partners. And the main objective, again, of these individual tools is for each family member to take time on their own before everybody gets together to talk, to think about how they see the care and support arrangement and how it affects them personally. And this is just a snapshot of some of the sections. We talk about health considerations, different environmental features in the home, and the types of care and support that people think are needed. And here the person with care needs is able to say, I don't think I require any help with bathing and showering, or I require some help with bathing and showering. And then family members use these check marks and these note spaces to indicate their current perceptions. And all of the family meeting materials are now fillable PDFs. So you can actually download them. You can print them if you prefer to write things out on paper, or you can fill them out electronically as a fillable PDF and save them and send them to each other. This is a snapshot of the shared assessment. You'll see that the sections are very similar and they kind of map what we have in the individual tools. And again, families go item by item. They discuss their different answers from their individual tools. They try to reconcile these perspectives that they have that may be different. And then they record the outcome of that discussion in the assessment. And you can see there's a section on the far right that says just can't agree. So right now there's just a thing that we can't agree about, but we're going to attack this later on, or we're going to talk about this further in the future. This is a snapshot of the family care and support plan. And there's a section for, who will do what when, and then we have an idea. So let's say there's some challenges with physical mobility. Some steps that we might take would be some physical therapy for the person with care needs. Who's going to take the lead on this? My dad's going to talk to the doctor at his next therapy appointment about possibly having some physical therapy. My sister Tanya is going to drive him to therapy appointments. We're going to do this with this next appointment, which is on August 2nd. And so it's a way of helping the family kind of map out what that's going to be. There's also a place here of who else might be available. So we might sometimes think more broadly about the care and support arrangement. And in this particular case, we have an option to extend this to maybe neighbors or cousins or folks that we wouldn't normally think of as part of the care and support arrangement. Okay, let me find my little thing here to move me ahead. We do know that sometimes this is a little challenging because things can get heated when you have conversations, and sometimes you could be opening a little bit of a can of worms. So we put these little breaks throughout the process and the tools, and this is really just a stoplight to say, hey, how you doing? Checking in. Do you need to take a break for a few minutes? Do you need to take a snack, have a drink? Do you need a break for a couple of days, or is it time to call in someone professional to assist with this conversation, which is something that Gail will be talking about and sharing with us a little bit later. So we did create some additional resources for everybody. Not everyone's as comfortable with technology. So we have some instructions about how to download and print materials. We created a couple of videos. I've had some folks tell us in our pilot projects that my brother's never going to read something if I send it to him, but if I send him a link to a video, he might watch it. So these are just short little snippets of like a 6-minute video that just talks about, you know, what can a family meeting do for us? Why would you want to do that? And how do we hold this family meeting? What are the steps in the process? We have some tip sheets. A big thing, and this might be very familiar to this audience, is there's a lot of conversation around whether the person with care needs should attend a family meeting. And so we have a tip sheet related to that of helping people think through that process. Our goal is always to have that person included, but there may be different ways to think about that. And some ways to help a family get to that location where they all agree that, yeah, this is an important voice and we really need to honor this in the process. And it can help. Some families need a little bit of nudging to try to get there. We also have a helpful caregiving resources booklet we put together. These are national resources that then folks can connect with to find more local resources. And we have a sample agenda for follow-up meetings. We have a couple of tools, and these were actually created in relation to feedback from some of our individuals living with dementia who served as reviewers for us and reviewed the tools for us. There's a lot of concern, often among professionals, that someone living with dementia, and that, you know, when we say someone living with dementia, we know there's a wide spectrum here and a wide range of abilities and abilities to participate in different things, different verbal and communication skills. But folks really felt that the tools that we had, that just people living with dementia wouldn't be able to do this. So we went to some people living with dementia and said, tell us, how do you like these tools? Do they work? Are they confusing? Is it too much to do? And the ones that we spoke to said to us, you know what, we really do like these tools, but there are going to be some people where this might be a little bit confusing for them or a little bit challenging. In that particular case, can you provide something where that person's voice can still be included in this process? And so this is set up as an all about me tool, and it's really like an interview. And the person can fill it out themselves. It's more kind of open-ended questions, kind of getting to some of the, what are the really important things to me, what matters most, or it can be done as an interview. Someone can ask the questions of that individual and record their answers. And that can help bring their voice into the process. Whether or not they're participating in that family meeting, we want to make sure that their view and their voice is incorporated. We also, they were encouraged to say, hey, you know, it's not just about the physical and the medical stuff. I mean, yeah, it's important whether I can bathe and whether I can get around and all those kinds of things, but it's also really important whether I feel engaged to my community. Am I having some social engagement? I mean, great that all my, you know, physical and health needs are being taken care of, but how am I connecting with people? How am I doing things that I love? How am I seeing the people that matter to me? And this was a tool to help people look at, just from a point of engagement, what do we have for this person? Like, what does their day look like? Are they having opportunities throughout the week to connect and have meaningful engagement in a way that is important to them? So I mentioned that this was originally designed as a tool for family members to use on their own, but we do have a guide for professionals that we created. And this is actually, it walks professionals through how can we use the OFOW materials with lots of different kinds of families that you may come into interaction with in your practice. So there are going to be some families that just don't have access to a computer or Wi-Fi or a printer. So how can the OFOW materials be used or provided to those individuals? Some families are going to be, you'll be able to provide them a link to this website. They'll be able to go there and just take it from there. And that's fantastic. Some families are going to be like, I'm not really sure why this is even helpful. Why would I hold a family meeting? What's that really going to do for us? And we have some materials to help families think through why that might be helpful. That's my little timer to myself. So I have about a minute and a half and I'm going to make it. And there are some families that are like, we really want to do this, but we just don't know how to get started. We don't even know what words to say. And that's where that scripting comes in the materials that we have. There are some families that are eager, they're willing, they start the process, but they just need some coaching to stay accountable to the process. So we said we were going to have a family meeting. Did you schedule the family meeting? Did it happen? How did it go? And there are going to be some families who actually need facilitation, and that's going to be the best way for them to communicate with each other. So we have some guides for professionals and some materials and kind of links them to the OFOW materials that can help in those circumstances. So the really exciting thing and one of the things we love about this is a freely accessible and public resource. And I will share, certainly the website is here. You can also contact me, and you can also contact Scripps Gerontology Center. It's on our website as an organization. There's a link to it there. But this is really about, here you go. This is the materials that you can access and you can use as a professional, that you can use as a family. And they are freely available to download and export. And on the website, we actually have these little flyers like the one that I'm showing right now that you can print and export from the website and print onto little cards to pass out to folks or have available in an office. This is our website. You can go to the website anytime. If you do, we really hope you'll give us some feedback. That would be great. We have little feedback surveys on there, and we would love to hear from your experience. And we hope that you'll utilize these materials. One little quick note here is we want these to be freely available. So if you do choose to download and print materials for families, it's certainly okay to recoup any printing or binding costs that you have. But the OFOW materials, because of our Creative Commons licensing, families can't be charged to access the materials or to use them. But if you want to say, hey, we'll print this for you and there's going to be a printing fee of something, you can certainly do that. Okay. And then this is my contact information and just an acknowledgement of our funders who've been so great with us. All right, so I'm going to stop here and I'm going to hand things over to Gail. And I'm really excited to be sharing this presentation with Gail because she is one of the folks that we would say, hey, if you need some professional assistance and facilitation, talk to folks like Gail. So thank you very much. And Gail, I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm glad I could be here with you today. I have personal experience with AFTD, and I'm always happy when I can do anything to help people who are working with people who have FTD or who are working with families. We work with families who unfortunately are not on the same page. We only do adult siblings. We don't work with anyone else. So most of the adult siblings that we're dealing with are dealing with the care of a parent. And, you know, it might have been, you might have read in the last couple of years, there's been a lot written on estrangement, family estrangement in the United States. And, you know, one estimate is that 27% of the people in the United States are estranged from at least one relative or family member. It's not uncommon at all. We have been using Zoom for pre-COVID because it's rare to find family members even in the same state, much less the same city or location. FTD presents two particular challenges to families getting on the same page or working on a plan. One is that sometimes the behavioral aspect of FTD is so alienating that it's hard for people to understand, you know, particularly if they have not been diagnosed yet. Another reason is because FTD, as you probably know, affects people who are young. So as opposed to talking with siblings who are along in their years and dealing with aging parents, I ran a support group and I had a mother who was 72 taking care of her 11-year-old granddaughter because her 50-year-old daughter was in the final stages. So it's really an assortment of ages that's very different. We sometimes get referrals from the Alzheimer's Association. And one of the problems that they find that families have is not someone in the family not being able to accept the diagnosis. That doesn't necessarily mean the person who has the diagnosis. We had a nurse contact us whose husband had just been diagnosed by the Alzheimer's Association with Alzheimer's, and she had included the brother-in-law because the brothers were very close, and her brother-in-law refused to acknowledge the diagnosis. He refused to accept it. And in terms of proceeding and working together, it was impossible unless she could somehow work this out. We try to get people to think about, it's very future oriented, because people don't necessarily like to talk about what is happening now. So sometimes what we do in order to get people to the table is frame it as, we're going to talk about, there is a diagnosis now, and what we need to talk about is, as Jennifer was talking about, what is the plan? So this way, we don't get the problems that will sometimes occur when you're trying to force a diagnosis on someone who is resistant. And, it isn't necessary to convince that person to have a family meeting and lay out a plan. We find that a lot of families have difficulty having a difficult conversation. Some of you may relate to that from your own personal experience or know people who are in that situation. We have taught courses on conflict resolution, and there are a few things, a few tools that we find that work really, really well. Some of the tools that we work with, people often think, oh God, I know about that. I know what that is. I know what that is. But if you sit back for a minute and listen, I'm going to be talking about tools that you might not have really perfected. And the first one being effective listening. We all think we are listening all the time, but as we all know, with phones, cell phones, with all the technology around, it's frequent that people aren't paying attention. They're not listening. And I will tell you that I tried something several years ago when I was speaking, and I had music on when people were coming in. And after I started the meeting, I asked how many people had heard the music, and most of them had heard the music. And I said, what was playing? And this was something that everyone would know what this music was. This is just, not a far-fetched piece by any means. And that's the difference between hearing and listening. They heard there was music on, but they weren't really listening. And we do that all too often. Really, to have a conversation that one needs to have, you need to be getting rid of all the distractions. The phones are off. They're not even, upright on a table. And there's making eye contact, and which is very important, because when you're talking about something, and when you're talking about a situation where someone has been diagnosed with a critical disease, there's a lot of emotion behind that. And someone who is talking wants to feel like the person is really listening. So part of effective listening is to every once in a while say, so I hear you saying that you're really worried about what's happening going forward. So you're not only acknowledging the words, but you're acknowledging the emotion that's there. And that may sound like, of course, we all know that. We all know that, but we don't necessarily practice that. And when it comes to these critical discussions, these highly emotional discussions, just by virtue of the fact that you're acknowledging what someone's saying and how they're feeling, makes them more likely to engage. This is something that we talk about all the time. And what we ask people to do is, just as you go on with your business for the rest of the day, think about the conversations you're having. Think about, are you facing the person when you're talking with them? Are you sitting down? What's the body language going on? Have you acknowledged what the other person's saying? Have you encouraged them by asking questions and showing interest in what they're saying. And like I said, it's something to be thinking about. A lot of people think of themselves as, oh, I'm the voice of reason in this conversation. A lot of conversations, they need voices, but they also need more ears in the conversation. They need more people who are listening rather than just feeling the need to speak. So interrupting, as all of us have experienced during a conversation that is a sensitive conversation, interrupting, that's something that can shut down the conversation pretty quickly. And you don't want that to happen. You want the conversation to be able to continue. So it's important to let someone finish what they are saying. When we have people, families who are coming in for mediation, everyone understands that number one, they're all being listened to, and we are watching to make sure everyone has had a chance to speak. But also there are ground rules. And for every family conversation, particularly over a highly charged issue, it's important to have those ground rules. And, you don't want people talking over one another. You don't want people, you definitely don't want people saying, well, I just might need to accept a call because I'm expecting a call during this. No, there's the time is set aside, and this is isolated time. You want to help people break out of the cyclical patterns that families have for talking, for speaking. All of us have that. All of us have patterns with siblings or our kids. And we've done it before, we have it again. And what happens is it escalates. It could have been cut off, but we're so used to this pattern that we keep it going. And, if you think about relationships you have, whether it's with an adult sibling or a child, perhaps you can think of a conversation that you have and there's a trigger element. There's a trigger there. And all you have to do is say that one trigger and it sets off a process in motion that's not going to end well. And we look for families, we try to help them break out of the pattern. If you can break out of that pattern, you have a better chance of listening to the other person, and you have a better chance of being heard. So that's something else. I'm trying to crunch so much in a short period of time. Another thing that we leave people with, and we did this in our classes, and it was really funny because this is a thing that we got the most response back about. We say to people, keep it in your head, respond, don't react. Respond, don't react. And at like the most tense times, just play that in your head. And what it might stop you from doing is, number one, your usual response. And, maybe it's just to lash out. Or maybe it's, oh my God, I've heard this before. And you wind up saying the same response, which is hostile and not open to conversation. We had a woman tell us that she went with her daughter to look at an apartment, and her daughter was getting a divorce. It was a very tense family situation. They were both tense to begin with. And the person who takes care of the building came into the apartment while they were there and said, your car's parked in the wrong spot. And this woman said, she turned around, she was ready to go off at this guy. And she started processing it. She said, okay, I'm going to respond. And she goes, oh, she said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And she engaged him in this conversation. And by the end of it, he said to her, oh, your daughter's moving in. I understand the circumstance. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye out for her while she's here. And this woman said she was just shocked when she left because it was so not her to have worked things that way. But clearly it was to her daughter's advantage for her to have handled it that way. So these are the kinds of things we talk about with family mediation. We sort of stop something in the process and say, okay, we're going to step back and look at that for a minute. Another very important point is to understand and separate the emotion from what's being said. So sometimes the wrong emotion is attributed to how someone is engaging. And we had one particular case where the mother was going to have to move out of her home. It had come to the end of the line, and there were 4 siblings. 3 of them all lived on their own. 2 of them didn't even live in the area. But one daughter, unfortunately, lived with the mother, and she was in her early 50s and just had not ever been able to really thrive on her own. And the other siblings just were so angry with her because they said, because she's such an angry person. And what they weren't hearing, but what eventually came out is she was scared. It wasn't that she was angry. She was so scared. What was going to happen to her? Where was she going to go? She was going to be losing her home too. The focus was on her mother, and everything just completely changed when they acknowledged the fact that, oh my God, yeah, we have to think about that. We have to talk about that. And this person who felt alienated before, all of a sudden felt like, okay, you understand. And I'm not alone here, which was a big deal. And she could then focus on, okay, what do we need to do for mom? And how do we work these problems out? Because now you understand it, like the problem is bigger than we thought. So it's really, as I said, with active listening, when you reflect back and say, I hear you kind of frustrated with this. It gives the person the opportunity to say, no, I'm not really frustrated. I'm really angry about this. Or instead of anger, yeah, I'm really frustrated. I really don't know what to do. And it clarifies where this person's coming from, which is extremely important. When you're talking about emotions and you're talking about an emotional subject. I know that I had seen in the chat, and I hope I covered it, but again, it's important, if possible, to have the person who's diagnosed participating in the conversation. And as we've said to the siblings who contact us, we understand your parent is having a problem, acknowledging it now. But the way it should be approached is, you have this diagnosis, you're feeling good now, you're functioning well now, but there has to be a plan. And don't you want to be involved in creating that plan? Do you want to make the decisions yourself or with your family? Or do you want to have the decisions made for you? And again, to be specific to FTD, from my family experience, as a lot of you have probably found out, it's very difficult to get a diagnosis. So what you want to do is, as soon as you have one, you need to have a discussion, because it's so long in coming. So Will, I'm turning it back to you.
Yes, hi Gail. And I'm going to welcome Jennifer back to the screen as well. And thank you both for your insights and your guidance and your compassion. These are such challenging issues, and there have been numerous comments and questions. I want to acknowledge first that there were a number of people that commented how much they appreciated this session. They asked about whether it was going to be recorded and available later, and the answer to that is yes. This session was recorded. Attendees to the conference will have access to it first, and then at a later date, AFTD will be posting the recordings on our YouTube website, so they will be available to the general public. I think to launch into some of the questions or comments, so I just wanted to acknowledge, and maybe you both alluded to this, but one of the challenges with FTD can be that the person has something called anosognosia, which is a lack of awareness or insight that anything is wrong. They have no awareness about the symptoms. It can be part of the disease. So there are a couple of different things that have come up, and I think certainly that would be challenging in terms of including a person with FTD with anosognosia in meetings to try to come to resolution. But also some of the questions were around other family members believing the person with anosognosia. So the person that has, let's say, BVFTD says nothing's wrong, it's my wife, that kind of scenario. So if both of you could just provide some comment on that or guidance on that in your work, how that can be best handled or facilitated.
Yeah, and I can share a little bit about that from our work. And certainly, we've worked with families in which not all members of the family decide that they are willing to participate in a family meeting. We had a family that had 9 siblings in one of our projects, and there were 5 siblings that were like, you know what, we're really good with talking about this and we want to have a conversation, and some of the others were not. And so if you have some people who are willing to come together and have a discussion, and sometimes that may not always be the person with care needs right away, but you always leave that door open and you continue to invite that person, those people, to a conversation or to let them know, what's going on, and be open to having them be part of the discussion, then we recommend. It doesn't mean that nobody can meet if there are some people that just aren't ready to have an open conversation about it, and that could change further down the road. You're never going to be able to force anyone to come together and have a discussion about something that they don't want to talk about, but you can be open and inviting and just share, we're doing this. We just want you to know that you can be included, and we would love you to be there. And if you are willing to, then we would love to have you.
Oops, you're muted there.
I said.
Yeah.
Okay, I said, thanks, Jennifer. Third time works. And I was wondering, Gail, if you had any comments on that specifically, or we can move on to some other questions.
Well, I will say specifically, that was a problem with my family. Was, my husband was not going to accept the fact that anything was wrong. And but what also made it more difficult is that most people have never heard of this disease. So by this point, some of his behavior had so alienated people, and he had created so many problems within the family. And sometimes the biggest thing for us was getting out information to relatives, friends, and family. This is what it is. Because no, we're not going to convince Bob that he's got this, but you need to understand that he has this, because I can't tell you the number of times people in his family would come up to me and say, he doesn't have dementia, he knows my name. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
so
and I
getting that word out and making people understand is a big part of it. And
AFTD, those that have chatted in these concerns and questions, if you've already reached out to this, you may have got our materials. But one of the things that we often do when family members are calling us in this situation is we have some very clear information and printed materials that talk about lack of insight and lack of awareness, that it's a part of the disease, that talk about some of the common behaviors or symptoms. And yes, other family members need to be ready, but sometimes it's always good to provide that information and, you know, keep messaging that. I want to move on to just a couple other things. So Jennifer, you didn't mention this. So there's a lot of good comments about Our Family, Our Way. I don't think you mentioned it's not available in any other languages currently, is it?
Not yet. Actually, we are in the process of writing some grants to see if we can do that. So we have to have some funding to be able to do that work. And we've been in some conversations around potential funding sources for that. But we have been requested. Spanish is one language that's been requested. And a couple of others folks have reached out to us about. So we are looking at that as future work.
That's great. And we'll look forward to hearing about that if that comes through, because we got a number of requests we have people around the world that are actually listening in, or have families that are listening in from around the world. I think as we sort of come to a close, I will just acknowledge that there were a number of people that commented how difficult it is to get an accurate diagnosis, and it's exhausting and it's frustrating. And AFTD is working hard to try to improve that, to increase early detection by primary care doctors, and then also to have diagnostic centers that understand the symptoms of FTD, not just Alzheimer's. So I encourage you to, call the helpline, contact the helpline. We do have diagnostic center information on our website, but yes, it is true that there's the ones that we have listed are not close to all of the people that might be on this call. Someone's acknowledging they wanted the tool in Spanish. I think the last thing I'll say, each of you, what do you think is the magic ingredient that helps, I'd say, a primary caregiver and family members, including the person with a dementia, to work together? What's the magic sauce? And I know it's different for every family.
For me and how in my own family with a, certainly different type of dementia, it's just acknowledging that we don't know everything. I don't know all the answers, and I don't know all the answers for you, this person whom I love and care about. And I need to hear from you as much as I can. And we just need to acknowledge that we want to be there for each other, and that's going to look different at different times. And if we can at least have a conversation, then we're not shutting down the process. So
I would have used the word acknowledgement too. I think it's really also acknowledging the appreciation for what people are doing. It's really, really important. And a lot of the anger that can develop is over people feeling like they are working so hard and no one's saying, you're doing a terrific job, or thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you so much for speaking on this topic. And to those of you that joined us today, this topic could go on for much longer, but we have more sessions taking place shortly. We'll all be taking a break for a while. Please come back and join us. And Gail and Jennifer, thanks again so much for offering your expertise and experience.
thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Bye now.
Bye.